They erased humanity in 4 minutes. 4 minutes! That was all it took for the Galactic Senate to decide that an entire species no longer mattered. I was there that day, sitting in my usual seat in the Grand Senate chamber, half listening and half wishing the session would end early. My name is Senator Varric Tull of the Krell Dominion, and in my 3 centuries of public service, I had seen many foolish decisions, but nothing compared to that one. The chamber was full, as always. Hundreds of delegates from across the galaxy sat in their glowing rows, wrapped in pride, politics, and polished lies. The ceiling above us shimmered like a false sky. The marble floor below reflected the light in perfect silver waves. Everything about that hall was built to make us feel important. Important enough to decide who lived in history and who disappeared from it. At the center platform stood High Chancellor Morveth, tall, proud, and smiling the kind of smile that made my skin crawl. In his hands was the Extinction Order, official Senate record, final classification, humanity extinct. Reason? No confirmed contact for 300 cycles. Their homeworld had long ago been written off after the Cascade War. Their colonies were marked lost. Their species was labeled gone, finished, forgotten. There was no grief in the room, no silence of respect, no moment of regret, just paperwork. One senator asked if there should be another survey. Another complained about wasted resources. A third said if they were alive, they would have answered by now. Then came the vote. Some voted yes without even looking up. A few looked bored. I voted abstain. Not because I had some deep love for humanity. Truthfully, I had never met a human. I only knew the old records. A young race, fierce, emotional, proud, hard to control, harder to understand. No, I abstained because something about the whole thing felt rotten, and because I hated the look on Morveth's face. The motion passed. Humanity was declared extinct. Then, just like that, the chamber moved on to trade routes and mineral taxes, as if 7 billion lives were nothing more than a line to be removed. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't, because less than an hour later, the great ceremonial doors of the Senate opened. Not the side doors, not the delegate entrances, the main doors. Those ancient metal gates had not opened during a live session in over 80 years. The sound shook the chamber like thunder. Every voice died. Every screen flickered. Security lights flashed across the walls in sharp violet beams. And there, standing in the doorway like she had every right to be there, was a single woman, a human woman. She was not tall, not armored like a war general, not dressed like royalty. She wore a dark-fitted uniform with a plain gray stripe across the chest. Her hair was tied back. Her face was calm. Too calm. But her eyes did not belong to someone who had come to beg. They belonged to someone who had survived fire. She looked across the chamber at all of us, at the senators, the guards, the chancellor himself, and then smiled, the kind of smile that made the air feel suddenly thin. "Sorry," she said, her voice steady and clear. "Looks like humanity missed roll call." No one moved, no one breathed, and in that frozen silence, I felt something for the first time in years. Not fear, not confusion, shame. Because the dead had just walked into our Senate, and she did not look weak. She looked offended. But when the guards rushed to her, she didn't panic. She laughed.
The guards moved first, 12 of them. They closed around the human woman in a perfect circle, weapons raised, armor shining under the purple emergency lights. In any normal moment, that would have been enough to end the problem. No one walked into the Galactic Senate and stayed standing for long. But this was no normal moment. She did not flinch. That was what unsettled me most. Not the alarms, not the weapons, not even the fact that a woman from a species we had pronounced dead was standing in the center of our government like she belonged there. It was her calm. It was too steady, too controlled, like she had already measured every soldier in that room and found none of them important. The commander of the security ring, a hard-faced Threxian named Cole, pointed all 4 of his rifles at her chest. "Identify yourself," he snapped. "You are in violation of Senate security law. Surrender now." The woman looked at him, then at the rifles, then back at him again, and she sighed. Actually sighed. It was not fear, it was annoyance. "Can we skip the dramatic part?" she asked. "You've got enough guns pointed at me to start a small war, and I'm not here to die. I'm here because your Senate made a mistake." A mistake. The word hit the chamber harder than any weapon. At the center dais, High Chancellor Morveth rose to his full height. He looked furious. His long robes trailed behind him like dark smoke as he stepped forward, every movement stiff with wounded pride. "You dare interrupt the Senate?" he said, voice deep and sharp, "and accuse this chamber of error?" The woman turned to him slowly. "Oh," she said, almost cheerfully. "Good. You're the one I need." A few senators gasped. One actually dropped his translation tablet. She took one small step forward. Instantly, the guards adjusted their aim. Every barrel followed her. "My name is Captain Ava Reyes, Earth Defense Command." Then she let the silence do the rest. I have heard silence many times in my life. Political silence, funeral silence, the silence before a war vote. But this was different. This silence was alive. It shook people. It crawled under their skin. Because every being in that room understood what those words meant. Earth, human, alive. Morveth's face changed. Not much, just enough for someone like me to notice. For one brief second, I saw not anger, but fear. "That is impossible," he said. Ava tilted her head. "And yet, here I am. The records show no confirmed human contact in 300 cycles." "Your records," she replied, "are not the same thing as the truth." A senator from the outer tiers stood up, trembling with outrage. "This is fraud, a trick, a biological imitation." Ava looked at him with such cold amusement that even from where I sat, I felt embarrassed for him. "You really want to call me fake," she said softly, "after you just erased my people on paperwork." Her voice never rose. That made it worse. We survived. We buried our dead, rebuilt our cities, and learned how to live without help from the galaxy that abandoned us. And today, after listening to you declare us extinct in 4 minutes, her jaw tightened for the first time. Something changed in the room then. The shock was still there, but now there was something else. Guilt. Not in everyone. Some still looked angry. Some looked insulted. Some looked ready to blame her for making them uncomfortable. But I felt it. A deep, burning shame. Because she was not begging us to believe in humanity. She was standing there as proof. And somehow that was worse for us than if she had come with an army. Then Morveth narrowed his eyes and said, "If you are truly human, prove it." Ava smiled. This time there was no humor in it. Then, before anyone could blink, the extinct woman moved, and the entire Senate forgot how to breathe.
Ava smiled. There was no warmth in it now, no humor, no playfulness. It was the kind of smile a person gives when they are done being doubted. "You want proof?" she said softly, looking straight at High Chancellor Morveth. "Fine, I'll give you proof." The chamber was so quiet that even the hum of the Senate lights sounded loud. Morveth stood tall above her, wrapped in his black official robes, trying to look powerful, but I was close enough to see it now. His pride was still there, yes, his anger too, but beneath both of them, something else had started to grow. Unease, because for the first time since she walked in, he realized this human woman was not guessing. She knew exactly what she was doing. "You have 30 seconds," he said. "Then this ends." Ava let out a small breath, almost like she was disappointed. 30 seconds is more than enough. Then she moved. I still do not fully understand what happened. One heartbeat she was standing in the center of a circle of armed guards. The next, she was gone from that spot. Gone. Gasps filled the chamber. Several guards shouted. One senator cried out in panic. Weapons turned wildly, but too late, because Ava was no longer in front of Morveth. She was behind him. One hand rested lightly on his shoulder. The whole chamber froze. Morveth did not move. He could not. Every guard wanted to fire, but none of them had a clean shot. One blast in the wrong direction, and they would kill the Chancellor themselves. Ava leaned in just enough for her voice to carry through the room. "Proof number 1, she said calmly. Humans learned very quickly that survival means adaptation." No one breathed. I felt my own pulse hammering in my throat. "How did you do that?" Morveth asked, and for the first time that day, his voice was not proud. It was strained. Ava stepped away from him on her own, slowly, almost politely, and returned to the center of the floor as if nothing had happened. "Training, science, necessity. Take your pick." Then she lifted a thin silver device no larger than a finger. A hologram burst into life above the Senate floor. Earth, the real Earth. Blue oceans, white cloud bands, green continents. But it was not the broken world from the old war archives. This was something else, something reborn. Great shining cities stretched along coastlines. Rings of orbital stations circled the planet like steel halos. Energy networks flashed across continents in bright golden lines, and around the planet floated warships unlike anything in the Concord Registry. Sleek, sharp, silent, built by survivors. A low murmur spread through the chamber. Some senators stood, others stared without blinking. I heard someone whisper, "Impossible." Ava heard it too. "No," she said, eyes still on the display. "Not impossible, just inconvenient for your records." The image shifted again. Population grids, industrial sectors, agricultural zones, defense systems. Then came a live tactical overlay of Earth's orbital shield net. It lit up the chamber in red and gold, showing layers upon layers of hidden defense platforms. The senators who understood military design went pale first. One of them muttered, "That is not a refugee civilization." Ava turned toward us. "No," she said, "it's not." Her voice remained calm, but now it carried something deeper. Pain, pride, old fire. "You left us buried under ash and radiation. You expected silence, so you called it extinction. But while you were forgetting us, we were rebuilding. While you were writing reports, we were raising children under broken skies. While you were closing our file, we were learning how to stand again." She placed a hand over her chest. "We are not ghosts. We are not ruins. We are humanity." And for the first time that day, nobody in that chamber looked at her like a mistake. They looked at her like history had come back alive. Then Ava deactivated the hologram, looked straight at the Senate, and said, "Now let's discuss what you owe us." The hologram vanished. Earth, its cities, its fleets, its impossible survival, all of it disappeared into the thin silver device in Ava's hand. But the feeling it left behind did not fade.
It stayed in the chamber like smoke after a fire. No one spoke for several long seconds. No one wanted to be the first, because the moment Ava Reyes had shown us that image, everything had changed. The Senate had entered this session thinking it was closing the final page on a dead species. Instead, it had just learned that the species it abandoned was alive, armed, and standing in front of us with clear eyes and a steady voice. And now she had asked the question no one wanted to answer. What did we owe them? High Chancellor Morveth recovered first. To his credit, he was skilled at hiding fear under ceremony. He straightened his robes, lifted his chin, and stepped back toward the speaking line as though he still controlled the room. "The Galactic Senate owes you nothing," he said. A few senators nodded too quickly, desperate to cling to that answer. Ava did not react right away. She simply looked at him, and in that quiet pause, I saw something dangerous in her face. Not rage, disappointment. It somehow felt heavier. "Nothing?" she repeated. "Humanity was listed as lost after the Cascade War," Morveth said. "Many worlds suffered, many records were incomplete, tragedies occurred across the sector. We cannot be expected to answer for every system that fell into silence." The words were polished, clean, political, and completely rotten. Ava's mouth tightened. "You did not lose track of us," she said. "You left us." A sharp murmur rolled across the chamber. Morveth spread his hands as if speaking to a child who did not understand complexity. "That is a dramatic interpretation. No, it is the truthful one." She took a slow step forward. No guard stopped her now. They still held their weapons, but their confidence was gone. Everyone in that room had already seen enough to know that if she wanted blood, she could have taken it. Instead, she brought something worse. Facts. 312 cycles ago, she said, human colonies requested emergency relief after the Cascade Front collapsed. Those requests were received by this Senate. We know they were received because we recovered the archives from one of your relay vaults. Morveth's face hardened. "Even if that is true, it is true." She tapped the device in her hand. A new hologram opened above the chamber, this time not of planets or fleets, but documents, official documents, transmission logs, distress calls, authorization chains, and then, to my horror, a voting record, Senate seal, Chancellor's office, emergency session notation, decision, no intervention, reason, resource preservation, low strategic return, human territories deemed unstable. The chamber erupted. Voices crashed into each other from every row. Some shouted denial, others demanded verification. A few senators simply sat there in stunned silence, staring at the floating record as if it might vanish if they refused to believe it. But it did not vanish. It remained, hard, bright, unforgiving. I felt my stomach twist, because this was not neglect, this was choice. Morveth's voice rose above the noise. "These records are incomplete, taken out of context." Ava turned to face him fully. "Then give us the context," she said. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. That was the moment the chamber truly broke. Not when she entered, not when she crossed the guard ring, not even when she showed us Earth alive. No, it broke when the most powerful voice in the Senate was asked for the truth and had none ready. Ava's expression changed then. For the first time, her control slipped just enough for the pain underneath to show. Not rage, disappointment. It somehow felt heavier. "When our skies were burning," she said, and now her voice carried a crack in it, small but real. "Children waited for rescue ships that never came. Entire cities sent pleas until their power grids died. Families stayed by dead comm towers, hoping someone out there still cared. You heard them, you voted, and you left us to bury each other alone." There was no shouting in the chamber now, only silence, terrible silence.
Her next words landed even harder because they were softer. We did survive, and I am proud of that, proud beyond words, but do not stand there and tell me we are owed nothing. I lowered my eyes. Around me, other senators did the same, because at last the truth was simple. Humanity did not return to ask for pity. Humanity had come back to collect a debt. Then, one senator stood up trembling, not to deny the record, but to ask the question that terrified everyone. What if we came for justice? Why bring warships?
The senator who asked it was old, even by Senate standards. He rose slowly from the third outer ring, his silver breathing tubes shaking against his chest, his voice thin but sharp enough to cut through the silence. "If you came for justice," he said, staring at Ava Reyes, "then why bring warships?" That question settled over the chamber like cold metal. It was the question everyone was thinking, but few had the courage to ask out loud. Ava looked at him for a long moment. She did not mock him. She did not smile. She did not answer quickly. And that alone told me the question mattered. Finally, she folded her hands behind her back and spoke in a low, steady voice. "Because hope without protection is just another way to die." No one interrupted. She turned slowly, letting her eyes pass over the hundreds of senators seated around her. "You see warships," she said. "We see the reason we are still alive." Her words were simple. That made them stronger. When the fires fell on Earth, promises did not shield us. Laws did not shield us. Sympathy did not shield us. We learned that the hard way. We learned it underground, in darkness, with ash in our lungs and dead cities over our heads. The chamber stayed silent. I could hear someone near me breathing too fast. Ava continued. "We did not build fleets because we wanted revenge. We built them because every child born after the bombardment deserved one thing we did not have." She paused. Safety. That word hit me harder than threats ever could, because it was not the language of conquest. It was the language of survivors. Senator Quell, who had earlier shouted for her removal, arose again with anger across his face. "That is still military intimidation," he snapped. "You came here with force behind your words." Ava turned toward him without hurry. "Yes," she said. The honesty of it shook the room. "Yes, Senator, I did." Quell seemed startled that she had not argued. She took one step forward. "I came here with proof, records, witnesses, and an offer for peace, but I also came here backed by the strength to make sure you could not ignore us again, because history taught us something ugly." Her voice became colder now. "The weak are mourned, the strong are heard." Several senators lowered their eyes. Even Morves did not interrupt. Ava's expression softened then, just a little, not with weakness, but with pain so old it had become part of her bones. "Do you think we wanted to become this? Do you think children hiding below a poisoned sky dreamed of growing up to build defense grids and kill sat arrays? We wanted music, families, open air, normal lives." Her jaw tightened. But normal died the day the galaxy chose strategy over humanity. I felt that line in my chest. Around me, the chamber no longer looked proud. It looked exposed. Then Ava looked back toward the senator who had asked the first question. "We brought warships," she said quietly, "so this meeting could stay a meeting." That landed like thunder, not because it was loud, because it was true. If humanity had returned weak, this Senate might have delayed, doubted, buried the issue in committees, or erased them all over again with cleaner language. But humanity had not returned weak. It had returned
Standing. Ava lifted her chin. We came with strength so we could choose peace from a position no one could strip away. Then she looked directly at Chancellor Morveth. So now the question is not why we brought warships. Her eyes hardened. The question is whether you understand why we had to. Morveth opened his mouth to answer, but before he could speak, Ava placed a data chip on the floor and said, "This contains every call for help you ignored."
Ava bent down slowly and placed the small data chip on the polished Senate floor. It made almost no sound, just a tiny click. But in that silent chamber, it felt louder than a weapon. "This," she said, straightening again, "contains every emergency transmission humanity sent during the fall, every distress call, every civilian request, every colony warning, every last message your Senate received and ignored." No one moved. No one even looked away. The chip sat there between Ava and High Chancellor Morveth like a piece of judgment no one wanted to touch. Morveth stared at it with visible disgust, but I knew that look. It was not disgust. It was fear wearing formal clothing. "You cannot verify the authenticity of such material in open session," he said sharply. "This is a performance." Ava looked at him as if she had expected that answer. "Of course," she said. "That's why I already sent copies to every verified Senate archive node before I walked through your doors." The chamber exploded. Delegates looked down at their desks. Screens lit up across every row. Personal terminals flashed with incoming secure packets. Archive officers began speaking over one another. Translators struggled to keep up. I tapped open my own console. There it was, a full packet stamped with human command authentication, matched against recovered Concord relay metadata, timestamp chains, routing confirmations, Senate intake seals. Real, painfully real. My claws tightened against the arm of my chair. The first file opened automatically. It was only audio. At first, there was static, crackling through the chamber speakers as someone in the central system accidentally synced the file to public output. Then came a human voice, a woman, breathing hard, trying to stay calm for someone else's sake. "This is Governor Elise Marr, New Carthage Colony. We are under sustained orbital fire. Civilian shelters are at maximum capacity. Food reserves down to 8 days. We are requesting immediate medical evacuation for children and wounded. Please respond. Please, just confirm someone hears this." The chamber froze. Her voice shook at the end, but she did not cry. That somehow made it worse. Another file opened. A young man this time, maybe not much older than a cadet. Smoke alarms screamed behind him. "This is Lieutenant Aaron Vale, Lunar Defense Grid. We have lost platforms 3 through 9. I repeat, we have lost them. If the Senate fleet is inbound, signal now. We can hold maybe 20 minutes more." He paused. Then, more quietly, "If no one is coming, tell my mother I stayed at my post." Someone in the chamber covered their face. Another file. A civilian transport captain, a school director, a hospital station chief begging for antibiotics. A child, voice trembling, saying, "Dad says keep talking into the radio because somebody has to answer eventually." The speakers cut out, not because the files ended, because someone on the chamber control board finally shut the public audio off. Too late, much too late. The room had heard enough. Ava did not move while those voices played. She stood with her hands clasped behind her back, face calm, eyes distant. But now I understood that calm better. It was not peace, it was discipline. The kind built from carrying grief so long that if you loosen your grip for even 1 second,
It will tear you apart." Morveth tried to recover. "These may show requests were received," he said, voice tighter now. "But receipt does not prove capacity for response. The war, no, don't do that." Her voice did not rise, yet the entire chamber went still again. "Do not hide behind complexity. Do not hide behind procedure, and do not insult our dead by pretending this was confusion." She pointed toward the active displays. "You heard the dates, the routing, the intake marks. Some of those calls were reviewed while relief fleets sat in reserve protecting trade corridors and Senate core assets." That drew horrified looks from every side. Because if true, and by then most of us feared it was, it meant humanity had not been abandoned due to inability. It had been abandoned by priority. Ava's eyes moved slowly across the chamber. "They kept calling," she said, softer now. "Even after your silence, even when their cities fell, even when they knew no one was coming." I could not lift my head. None of us deserved to. Then Ava took one slow breath and said the sentence that broke what was left of the room. "We saved those recordings because we wanted our children to know two things: how alone we were and how we survived anyway." Then a senator from the inner circle stood up shaking and said, "Chancellor, were we ordered not to respond?" The question came from Senator Ilya Vaughn of the Inner Circle. She was known across the Senate for one thing above all others: she never asked reckless questions. Every word from her was measured, careful, and sharp enough to leave a mark. So when she stood, trembling slightly, and asked, "Chancellor, were we ordered not to respond?" the whole chamber seemed to stop breathing again. No one wanted the answer, not really, because some truths are easier to suspect than to hear out loud. High Chancellor Morveth did not answer at once. He stood still beneath the pale chamber lights, his long, dark robes hanging around him like shadows. For the first time since Ava had entered, he looked old to me. Not wise, not noble, just old and tired. "That is a dangerous accusation," he said at last. Senator Vaughn did not sit down. "I did not make an accusation," she replied. "I asked a question." Morveth's jaw tightened. All across the chamber, terminals still glowed with distress files Ava had sent. Open transmissions, routing stamps, response windows, silence where answers should have been. Ava stood in the center of it all, quiet and still, watching, not pushing, not interrupting. She did not need to. The truth was doing enough damage on its own. Morveth finally looked toward the senior archive officials, seated along the eastern tier. "Emergency war protocols were in effect," he said. "Communication restrictions were common. Fleet movement was limited. Strategic assets had to be preserved." That was not an answer. Everyone knew it. Senator Vaughn knew it too. "So I will ask again," she said, more firmly now. "Was there an order not to respond to human distress calls?" Morveth's silence became heavier. A low murmur rippled through the chamber. Delegates leaned toward each other. Screens updated. Private channels flashed open and shut. The room had crossed into dangerous ground now. Not just moral danger, political danger. Because once blame takes shape, it starts looking for a name. Ava took one slow breath. I noticed her hands now. They were steady, but not relaxed. She was holding herself together with effort. This mattered to her more than any of us could fully understand. Then, one of the archive officials stood. He was a narrow-framed elder from the Records Directorate, a man so quiet that most senators barely remembered he existed. His name was Solrin. I had served beside him for years and had never once heard him raise his voice. Now he looked pale. "There was a directive," he said. The chamber erupted instantly. Shouts exploded from every side. Some senators demanded order, others demanded evidence. A few simply stared at him in horror, as though they wished he had remained silent forever. Morvith spun toward him. "You will be careful with your words." Solrin swallowed hard, but he did not sit down. The directive was classified under wartime triage authority. Priority rescue and defense deployment were restricted to core treaty worlds, strategic industrial zones, and species designated essential to central stability. His voice shook. Human territories were removed from priority response. A sound escaped the chamber then, something between a gasp and a wound opening. I felt cold all over, because we all understood what those polite government words really meant. Humanity had not simply been left waiting. Humanity had been ranked beneath saving. Ava closed her eyes for one brief second, only one, but in that single moment, the calm in her face cracked just enough for the pain beneath it to show. When she opened her eyes again, they looked brighter, harder, and far older than before. "Say it clearly," she said. No anger, no shouting. That made it even more powerful. Solrin looked at her, then at the chamber, and his shoulders sank. "I was told," he said weakly, "not to divert aid to human systems." No one spoke. No one moved. The truth had finally arrived, and it was uglier than rumor, uglier than suspicion, even uglier than guilt. Ava lifted her chin, and when she spoke, her voice carried grief, pride, and something like iron. "Thank you," she said to Solrin. Then she turned toward the chamber. "My people died hearing silence. Now at least that silence has a name." But before anyone could recover, Morvith slammed his hand onto the central podium and shouted, "You still do not understand why that order was given."
Morvith's hand struck the central podium so hard that the sound echoed through the chamber. "You still do not understand why that order was given," he shouted. The force in his voice made several senators flinch. For one sharp moment, the old power returned to him. The chamber turned back toward the chancellor, and I could see what he was trying to do. He was trying to take control of the story again. Ava did not move. "Then explain it," she said. Morvith straightened, breathing hard, his face tight with anger and humiliation. "The Cascade War was tearing the Concord apart," he said. "Whole sectors were collapsing, supply lines were failing, core systems were under direct threat. We were losing fleets faster than we could replace them. If we had diverted major assets to every damaged frontier world, the entire Central Alliance would have fallen." His voice grew stronger as he spoke, more formal, more polished. "Hard choices were made, brutal choices, but they were made to preserve civilization itself." There it was, the defense. Not denial, not this time, just the oldest excuse in government history. "We sacrificed you for the greater good." A bitter taste rose in my mouth. Around the chamber, I saw some senators nodding slowly, not proudly, not comfortably, but with the sick recognition of people who had used the same logic before. Ava's eyes stayed locked on him. "Then that was it," she asked quietly. "You decided humanity was acceptable to lose." Morvith's expression hardened. "We decided that saving the core was the only way to save anything." Ava took one step forward. "And who gave you the right," she asked, "to decide which children counted?" That question struck harder than any speech. Morvith opened his mouth, but she did not let him hide behind another polished answer. "You speak about civilization like it was some sacred thing," she said, her voice calm and sharp. "But civilization that survives by abandoning the helpless is just cowardice wearing a flag." A tremor moved through the room. No one interrupted her. No one dared. "You want me to understand your reasons. Fine, I do understand them. You were afraid.
You were overwhelmed. You protected what was closest to you and called it strategy. I understand exactly how it happened." Her voice dropped lower. "But understanding it does not forgive it." Morvith's face darkened. "You stand there alive because our war destroyed the enemy threatening your system." Ava's jaw flexed. "No," she said. "I stand here alive because my people refused to die after your war destroyed our world." That line cut straight through him, straight through all of us. For the first time, Morvith had no immediate answer. Then Ava looked around the chamber at all the frightened, guilty, silent senators and spoke not with rage, but with terrible dignity. "You keep speaking as if humanity should be grateful for surviving your decisions," she said. "We are not grateful. We are proud. Proud of every child born underground. Proud of every city rebuilt from poison and ash. Proud of every generation that carried memory like fire in their chest and still chose to rebuild instead of surrender." My throat tightened, because that was the difference between us and them. We made excuses for the past. They turned pain into purpose. Ava lifted her chin. "So no, Chancellor, I understand why the order was given. I just reject the lie that it made you noble." Silence followed. Long, burning, honest silence. Then Morvith looked away first, and in politics, that is sometimes the same as bleeding. Finally, he said in a colder, smaller voice, "The Senate will verify your claims." Ava gave a single nod. "Good," she said. "You have 72 hours." But as Ava turned to leave, she stopped at the doors and delivered one final warning that made even the generals go pale.
Ava turned toward the giant Senate doors. For a second, I thought that was the end of it. She had made her case, exposed the lies, and given the Senate its deadline. In any other political crisis, that would have been enough. The room was already drowning in shame, fear, and confusion. No one had the strength left to speak with confidence. But Ava Reyes was not finished. She walked across the polished floor with calm, steady steps. The guards moved aside without being told. That alone said more than any speech. Minutes earlier, they had surrounded her like a criminal. Now they parted for her like soldiers making way for a commander. At the doorway, she stopped. She did not turn immediately. She stood there for one silent moment, framed by those enormous metal doors, the same doors she had walked through as the ghost of a dead species. Purple security lights still flashed faintly across the chamber walls, painting sharp shadows over every face. Then she looked back. I will never forget that look. It was not rage. It was not triumph. It was something heavier. It was the expression of someone carrying the grief of generations and still choosing restraint. "You have 72 hours, she said, her voice clear enough to reach every level of the chamber. "Use them wisely." Morvith stood rigid at the center podium. "The Senate does not respond well to threats." Ava's eyes settled on him. "Good," she said, "because that was not a threat." No one made a sound. She took one step back toward the door, then added, "That was me doing you the courtesy of explaining consequences before they arrive." A chill passed through the chamber. Even the military delegates went still. Ava folded her hands behind her back. "Your verification teams are welcome. Send diplomats, send scientists, send historians, send legal observers. We will open our records, our cities, and our archives. We will answer every honest question." Then her voice hardened. "But do not send warships." The way she said those 4 words made the entire room tighten. "Do not test our borders to measure our fear. Do not approach our world as if Earth is still wounded, helpless, and alone. And do not mistake our offer of peace for an inability to defend ourselves." There was no pride in her voice now, only certainty. That made it far more frightening. "Our defense grid," she continued, "has standing orders.
Any hostile vessel entering restricted space will be treated as an active threat. There will be no warning shots. There will be no second chance. We have buried too many people to gamble on good intentions wrapped in battleship steel." A senator near me swallowed so hard I heard it. Ava looked across all of us one last time. "We came back to be recognized," she said. "Not pitied, not managed, not erased again." Then, more softly, with an emotion that cut deeper than anger ever could, she added, "My people have spent generations teaching their children how to survive the silence you left us in. I would prefer the next generation learn something better." That line broke something inside me, because beneath the steel, beneath the warning, beneath the impossible confidence, there it was again. Hope. Not soft hope, hard-earned hope, human hope. Ava placed her hand against the side panel beside the door. The ancient gates began to open wider with a deep mechanical groan. Then she said her final words. "Choose dignity," she told the Senate, "because if you choose fear again, humanity will survive that too." And then she walked out. 12 hours later, I was standing on the bridge of a Concorde ship, personally ordered to lead the mission to Earth.
12 hours later, I stood on the bridge of the diplomatic ship Resolute Path, staring at a blue world that should not have existed. Not like this, not after everything that had happened to it. Earth hung before us, bright and alive against the dark, wrapped in clouds and sunlight, beautiful in a way that made my chest feel tight. I had seen the old war records. I had seen the ruined maps. I had seen the silent reports that called it broken, poisoned, finished. Those reports had lied. Or maybe the truth had simply outlived them. "We're being tracked," my tactical officer said, her voice too calm to be natural. "How many locks?" I asked. She swallowed. 17 confirmed, possibly more. Around me, the bridge crew grew still. No one panicked, but I could feel it in the air. Fear, respect, the sharp awareness that one wrong move could turn this diplomatic mission into a funeral. A thin layer of sweat formed under my collar. "Send our credentials again," I said. "Full diplomatic authorization, no defensive posture, no aggressive scan patterns." My communications officer nodded quickly and pushed the signal out. For 30 long seconds, there was nothing. Then the speakers came alive with a human voice. "Concorde vessel, this is Earth Defense Command. State your purpose." Direct, cold, controlled. Not rude, just careful. I understood that tone. A people who had once cried for help and received silence would not welcome strangers carelessly. I stepped toward the central console. "This is Senator Varric Tull of the Krell Dominion, leading the Senate's verification mission. We come under diplomatic authority. We request peaceful contact with the government of Earth." Silence again, a long one, too long. My science officer leaned toward me. "They're checking us from every angle," she whispered. "I know," I said. At last, the human voice returned. "You are cleared for limited approach. Follow the beacon lane exactly. Deviate and our defense grid will treat it as hostile intent." My communications officer looked at me nervously. I answered the channel myself. "Understood." Then, after the smallest pause, the human voice added, "And Senator, yes? Try not to start a war." The channel went dead. A few members of my crew made strange sounds that might have been laughter if fear had not been sitting on their throats. We followed the beacon line, and then we saw it. Not just Earth, what humanity had built around it. Stations, shipyards, defense platforms, energy rings, orbital factories, civilian traffic moving in disciplined patterns, patrol craft sliding through the black like hunting birds. Nothing looked ancient, nothing looked borrowed. It was all new, hard-earned, purposeful. And the warships, by the stars, the warships. Angular, dark,
fast-looking even while standing still. Their hulls bent sensor returns in strange ways, as if they did not wish to be measured. Their weapon architecture was unlike anything in our Senate registry. My tactical officer kept rechecking the readouts, as though they might become less frightening if she looked at them enough times. "They built all this in secret," she whispered. "No," I said quietly, surprising myself. "They built it in silence." There was a difference. Soon a shuttle detached from one of the nearby stations and moved toward us with smooth, perfect confidence. The docking lights turned green. I went to receive them myself. When the inner door opened, Captain Ava Reyes stepped through first, wearing that same dark uniform and the same steady expression she had carried into the Senate chamber. Behind her came two others, a tall human man with warm eyes and a shorter woman with the posture of someone who never relaxed fully. Ava looked at me and extended her hand. "Senator, welcome to Earth." This time, I knew what the gesture meant. I took her hand. Her grip was firm, real, and human. And in that moment, the truth stopped being political. It became personal. Because the species we had erased on paper was standing in front of me, alive enough to be warm. But nothing prepared me for what I saw when I finally stepped onto Earth itself.
Nothing prepared me for Earth. Not the fleets, not the stations, not even the impossible fact that humanity had survived. What struck me most was what they had done with their pain. As our shuttle descended through the atmosphere, I expected scars. I expected damage. I expected a world still half broken, still limping, still defined by the war that nearly killed it. Instead, I saw life. Oceans shining beneath the sun, great green regions spreading across land once marked dead, cities rising with clean lines and bright glass, built with purpose instead of vanity, roads, transit lanes, farms, energy towers, schools, hospitals, an entire civilization not simply restored, but remade. Ava stood beside me near the viewport and watched my face more than the world below. I think she wanted to see the moment I understood. Earth's biosphere had been painstakingly rebuilt, with massive reclamation work and environmental repair after the bombardment. The humans were proud of that, and they had every right to be. Aliens declared humanity extinct. The shuttle landed in New Geneva, their capital city, built in the crater of an older city destroyed during the war. Even that choice carried meaning. Humanity had not hidden its wounds. It had built its future directly on top of them. Aliens declared humanity extinct. Crowds stood behind security lines waiting for us. They were quiet. That silence felt heavier than shouting would have. Some faces showed curiosity. Some showed anger. Some showed something I could not bear for long, measured disappointment. They had not come to spit at us. They had come to look at the galaxy that had failed them. And many of them held signs. Remember the bombardment. Justice for Earth. Never forgotten. Then I saw a child, no more than 6 years old, holding a sign far too large for her small hands. It read, "My great-grandmother survived the fire. Did you apologize?" That question pierced me deeper than any accusation, because no speech I could give, no official statement, no polished diplomatic phrase could hide from the truth in it. Ava noticed where I was looking. "We teach it in schools," she said quietly. "Not to keep hate alive, to keep memory alive." I turned to her. "That must be painful." "It is," she said, "but forgetting is more dangerous." Those words stayed with me as we entered the council chamber. There, Premier Lin Zhang showed us what Earth had endured. Footage of cities burning,
Survivors digging underground with their bare hands, children growing up without sunlight, generation after generation clawing life out of poisoned soil and ash. They did not show us this to beg for pity. They showed us so we would understand why humanity refused to be dismissed again. Then the displays shifted to the present. Billions alive, colonies reclaimed, one government formed through the Continental Accords, and a civilization standing before the galaxy as an equal, not a victim. Aliens declared humanity extinct. Aliens declared humanity extinct. That was the moment I finally understood what made humans dangerous. Not their fleets, not their weapons, not even their anger. It was their memory. They remembered the fire, and somehow, instead of letting it consume them, they turned it into light. That night, at a human dinner table, a young officer walked up to me and said the one thing I did not deserve to hear. Thank you. That night, I sat at a human dinner table and learned more about dignity than I had in 300 years in the Senate. It was not a royal hall, not a formal state chamber, just a simple private room inside the diplomatic residence overlooking the lights of New Geneva. The table was long, made of dark wood, scarred in places by age. Real use, human use. There were no polished ceremonial drones, no silver floating trays, no music designed to impress. Only people. Ava sat across from me. Premier Lin sat at the head of the table. Officers, engineers, and civilian leaders filled the remaining seats. They spoke with directness, with warmth, with that strange human mix of pain and humor that still felt unfamiliar to me. And then, during a quiet moment between courses, a young human officer approached my chair. She could not have been more than 25 by human measure. Her uniform was neat, but her hands were nervous. "Senator Tall?" she asked. I stood at once. "Yes." She gave me a small, respectful nod. "Thank you," she said. I stared at her, unable to answer. "For what?" I finally asked. "For coming," she said. "For seeing us with your own eyes." The shame that hit me then was almost unbearable, because gratitude was the last thing I deserved. "My people failed yours," I said quietly. The young officer held my gaze. "Maybe," she said, "but tonight you listened. That matters too." Then she returned to her seat, leaving me with words heavier than any accusation. Later, after the meal ended, I stepped out onto the balcony overlooking the city. The lights of Earth stretched far into the distance, bright and steady beneath the night sky. This world had been burned, abandoned, nearly erased, and still it stood. Not bitter enough to become monsters, not broken enough to disappear, just proud enough to survive. Ava joined me a few moments later. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then I said the only honest thing left in me. "The Senate will issue statements, investigations, trials perhaps. There will be committees, reparations debates, legal storms." I looked down at the glowing city below, but none of that will be enough. Ava leaned against the railing beside me. "No," she said, "it won't." I nodded slowly. "Then why come back at all?" She looked out over Earth, and when she answered, her voice held grief, pride, and something stronger than both. "Because disappearing would have made your lie true." That sentence settled deep inside me. Humanity had not returned for revenge alone, not for recognition alone, not even for justice alone. They had returned because their story belonged to them. No one else had the right to close it. I turned to her fully and bowed my head, not as a senator, but as one living being before another. "I am sorry," I said. Ava was silent for a long time. Then she answered with the most human words I had ever heard. "We know. Now do better."
Below us, Earth shone like a promise the galaxy had not earned, but had been given one final chance to honor. And for the first time in many years, I believed we might. Because humanity, the species we had declared extinct in 4 careless minutes, had returned not as ashes, but as proof that pride, pain, and hope could survive anything. The galaxy had once left humanity to die in silence. Now it would learn to hear them. May this message strengthen your faith and renew your hope. Thank you for staying until the end. If this touched your heart, like, share, and subscribe to Astro Realms for more uplifting content. May God's blessings overflow in your life. See you soon.